So today we're going to be talking about the basic two-dimensional formulas to find perimeter and area of shapes. And these are going to come as the basis for our next unit in three-dimensional shapes. So you should have your notes in front of you, and you should have already finished your quiz on polygons. I'd also recommend having some colored pencils with you, although those are not mandatory, just strongly recommended. All right, so let's dive in. Really quickly, let's go over the formulas for each of these shapes. So we're going to be discussing perimeter a lot and area. Perimeter, which I'm usually going to color in as pink, just as a quick reminder, is the measure along the outside edge of a shape. So if I were to fence in an area, the length of a fence, we're talking about length, okay? The other one we're going to be talking a lot about is area. And area is a square unit. We're measuring the space that is inside, okay? The space inside is going to be our area, okay? Perimeter for a rectangle is 2 times the length, because you have 2 lengths, and plus 2 times the width, okay? Typically what you're doing with perimeter is just adding up the outside edges. A couple of other things to remind you about as we go through here. As we're calculating the area of a triangle, okay, please remember that it is 1/2 base times height. And in general, we're going to be referring to height as perpendicular to the base. Okay, so the height is at a 90-degree angle to the base of a shape typically. Okay, and sometimes we refer to those as slightly different things. All right, circles, which we're going to have a whole nother unit on, have a special word for perimeter. Instead of calling it perimeter, we use the word circumference, okay? And there's 2 ways that we can calculate circumference, and that's because the 2 main measures of a circle are its diameter. That's from the outside edge to the outside edge, okay? That's for your diameter, okay? And for your radius, okay? And radius is from the outside edge to the center of the triangle. Okay, the radius is from the center out. So a diameter is times 2 radius. It's 2 radiuses, right? And a radius is half a diameter. Okay, so when we're calculating circumference, or the perimeter of a circle, remember circumference is the outside edge. Okay, we're going to be multiplying by pi. It's going to be 2 times pi times our radius. Or, instead of 2 radiuses is equal to 1 diameter. So you could also say instead of 2 radiuses, pi times the diameter. When we're calculating the area of a circle, you want to calculate pi times the radius times itself. Radius times radius, or radius squared. Okay? A regular polygon, and this can be any polygon, is going to have an area that is going to be equal to 1/2 times the actual perimeter. So you have to measure the outside side, right? And you can calculate that by just adding together that many sides or multiplying by that many sides. Okay, so the perimeter times the apothem, which is similar to a radius. Okay, it's kind of like the radius of the polygon. Okay, so don't forget that P in this case is always going to stand for perimeter. Right, our perimeter of the shape times the apothem. And for a parallelogram, it's actually the exact same as a rectangle, but instead of calling it length and width, we're just calling it base times height. And anytime we're discussing base and height, base is going to be perpendicular with height. Okay. Same with a trapezoid. But a trapezoid has 2 bases, so it's 1/2 the height, and the height should always connect the 2 bases which you'll be adding together. So base plus base, right? Base plus base, and you're multiplying by the height, whereas here you only have 1 height times 1 base. All right, let's give these a shot and try calculating a couple of them. I assume that you can find the area and the perimeter of a rectangle, okay? The area of this is length times width, which you should get 84 centimeters. And the perimeter, you're going to add together 12, and remember opposite sides are congruent, so 12 times 2 plus 7 times 2, which is 38 centimeters. Okay, 84 centimeters squared, this one's 38 centimeters, okay? Area and perimeter of a triangle. Biggest thing about a triangle is that you're going to want to identify the base and the height. Okay, remember that height is at a 90-degree angle from base, and base should be the side of one of your triangles. Okay. So area is going to be 1/2 base, which is in this case 12, times our height, which in this case we've identified as 4. So we do half of 12 times 4, which would give us 24. If they don't give you a measurement, you can just leave it as units that are undefined. Okay? Perimeter, we don't have a formula for perimeter, but we do know all the outside edges. We know that this side is 9, plus this side, which is 5, plus this side, which is 12. So we're just adding those together to get a perimeter of 26. Okay? Alrighty, so let's move forward to talk a little bit about circumference and some more complicated ones. Still not too tough, just chugging through. One thing that you do need to be aware of when you're calculating for circles, oftentimes they're going to ask you to give it to you in terms of pi and in terms of decimal rounded to the nearest hundredth. In terms of pi just means that you are going to keep the pi symbol in your answer, okay? Using a decimal value means that you're going to multiply by 3.14 and you're going to round to the nearest hundredth. Okay, so let's look at circumference. And remember that circumference is a measure of perimeter. That's our outside edge. So what they have given us here, always good to identify it first, is a diameter. All right, they've given us a diameter. So to calculate my circumference, I have two options, and I'm going to use the one that uses diameter. So I have a diameter, I'm going to use pi times diameter. Okay, so I have circumference is going to be equal to pi times my diameter, which is 12. Now typically when we write this in terms of pi, we're going to write the 12 out front like a coefficient. So 12 pi would be how we would write it in terms of pi. If I want to say what my circumference is, it's 12 pi. Okay. Then to go from pi to the decimal value, I just multiply by 12 times 3.14, which is what pi is, abbreviated. So 12 times 3.14, we would end up with 18.84 yards. Okay, so that gives us pi and the decimal value for circumference. Let's look at area. So area has a different formula, and it's going to require a radius. It's pi times radius squared. Area is equal to pi times radius squared. But we don't have the radius, we have the diameter. Luckily for us, the diameter is equal to 2 radiuses, so half of the diameter is 1 radius, right? So our radius is going to be equal to 6. Right? So area is going to be equal to pi times our radius of 6 squared. To put this in terms of pi, we just take 6 and multiply it by itself. 6 squared is 36. And we say that this is 36 pi. That's in terms of pi. Then multiply by 3.14, 36 times 3.14, to get the decimal value of 113.04 yards squared, because it's a square unit. Okay? Alrighty. A couple other things that we'll go over with you. I want to keep it relatively short. Since you're probably not familiar with doing perimeter and area of a polygon, let's take a look. Now it has us calculating perimeter first, and that's actually pretty strategic because we need perimeter to calculate area. Remember that perimeter is just a measure of the entire outside edge, And we know that this is a regular polygon. So if one of the sides is 12, then all of the sides are 12. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sides. So my perimeter is going to be equal to 12 times 8 sides. Or you can add 12 8 times if you really want to. And when I multiply that together, I get a perimeter of 96. Okay? The area is going to use perimeter as part of the calculation. All right? It's going to ask for the perimeter, which we've already calculated, and the apothem. And remember that apothem is just like the radius of a regular polygon. Okay? It's the part from the center to an outside edge at a 90-degree angle. Okay? All right. So our area is going to be equal to 1/2 times perimeter, which is 96, times the apothem, which was given to us as 14.5. And if you're wondering where I'm getting these formulas, I'm just referencing them back up here, right? Area is equal to 1/2 perimeter times the apothem, okay? So I found that, and I enter it. Half of 96 times 14.5 is going to give us 696. They did not give us a unit for that, right? I feel like for these two, area and perimeter, you're probably capable of calculating these yourself. There is just something that I want to make sure that you're aware of, and that's identifying your base and your height, okay? Because the perimeter, you're just going to go ahead and add all of them together, right? We have outside edges, and they're all provided to us. If we add 13.1, 6.4, 10.7, and 19.4 are added together, you get 49.6 feet. And then area is the one where you got to be a little bit more careful because you're using base and height. Now remember, the height is going to connect the two bases, and in a trapezoid, which this is, there are two bases, and they are parallel to each other. So I have a base and a base that are parallel to each other. You have to use the sides that are parallel to each other, and the height should be the distance between the two bases. Okay? So when I go to fill out this formula, I have area is equal to 1/2 my height, which is between my two bases, 9.8, and I'm multiplying that times both of the bases added together, which is 19.4 plus that's 6.4 added together. Okay? When you multiply by half and then multiply that by the two bases added together, you should get 126.42 feet squared. Square unit because it's area. This one I feel like, again, perimeter is just going to be 7 plus 7, 3 plus 3, which gives you 20 meters. And area is just going to be base times height. Okay? So you're multiplying your base, which is one of your sides, times the height, which is at a 90-degree angle to the base. Okay? Area is equal to 7 times 2, or just 14 meters squared. Okay? So really briefly, let's take a look at some of the applications on the back, because I want to make sure that you understand how to do that. All right, so flipping over to the back is where your practice is that I expect you to be able to go through. A couple of things that I want to point out to you. First thing that I would like to point out is that on some of these cases where it's asking you for perimeter and area, you're missing some information. Okay? I expect that you can figure this out. If I want the perimeter, that means I'm looking at the outside edges, but I'm missing, for example, this side and this side. All right. However, I know that this entire length is 11. I have used 5 of that here, so the remaining amount has to be 6, right? I expect that you can also figure out what this part is by looking at the fact that we've used 4 already, and then what would remain would be equal to this part, okay? You're also going to use that when you're calculating area, because you're going to break it into 2 rectangles and calculate the rectangle on the top and the rectangle on the bottom, using those missing sides that you've solved for, okay? Additionally, down here, It's not always easy to tell on a right triangle, but remember base and height are perpendicular to each other, so one of these is base and one of these is height. And you should have also noticed the congruency mark, so this one's 6, this one's also 6. That would be your base and your height. Okay. Let's take a look also at how to solve for a missing length. So here it's giving you the area. It says a rectangle has a length of 12.5 meters, and it's giving you an area of 390. You have to determine the width. So I'm going to use the formula of a rectangle. I go find the formula. I know that area is equal to length times width. Now I'm going to fill in the numbers I have. I have an area of 390, which is going to be equal to the length of 12.5 times my width, which I don't know. Now I'm going to solve for W. I do that by dividing by 12.5 on both sides. Okay, that cancels out, and whatever I get, W is equal to my answer, which would end up being my width. Okay? You're going to do that for this form, for 4 and 6 as well. 8 is a little bit more tricky. Just remember that area is equal to pi times the radius squared. They've already given you 49 pi, so my area is equal to 49 pi, which is equal to pi times the radius squared. Now, first thing I want to do is get the radius by itself, so I'm going to divide by pi. There's already pi on this side, so these cancel out completely. Also, don't forget, how do you get rid of a square? You take the square root. Okay, so getting the square root of 49 should give you your radius. But then how do I get the diameter? That gives me my radius of 9. Your diameter is going to be twice that amount. So diameter is equal to 2 times your radius. I think you can figure that out now that we've solved for the radius. If you have any other questions, please refer back to this, and we'll go over it further when we return. Thanks.